Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Let me go ahead and get our introduction going. Welcome to everyone who's streaming with us. We're really thrilled that you're with us. If you would like to be on the mailing list of people who every Thursday get a little email blast from me about what's going on the coming Sunday, please give us your information here at the welcome table. We would love to have your participation always, and always your generous contributions to help all this happen. I do hope that you'll stop over at this table because our featured guest, his paperback version of his book now, Redeeming the Past, My Journey from Freedom Fighter to Healer, is right there, and I can tell you that it is a worthy book to own and to give away, to share, and to be inspired by. Just a quick word of introduction. Michael Lapsley is arguably one of the most courageous people on the planet today. During the bad old days of apartheid in South Africa, he was a monk, as he still is. And he also joined Mr. Mandela's political party and was a vocal opponent of apartheid. And apartheid was not a group of pacifists. They thanked Michael by sending him a letter bomb, which blew off both of his hands and blew out one of his eyes. Michael, during his recuperation, committed himself to go from being a victim to a victor, from a victim to a survivor to a victor. And part of that recipe for his being such a fruitful healer was learning how to heal other people and giving himself to people throughout the world who are the victims of trauma. So he's an expert in post-traumatic stress syndrome and healing folks. He's going to be interviewed by one of our staff clergy today, the Reverend Dr. Sally Howard. Sally is a psychoanalyst, and we're very grateful that she's been a member of All Saints Church for many years, and as God called her to the priesthood, she went through discernment here at All Saints Church, and we're really grateful that she makes time in a very busy psychotherapeutic calendar to work at All Saints also. She works in the pastoral care department and is heading up our new healing ministry. We have so many healing modalities that come to us here at All Saints Church, from Sunday morning kneel at the prayer rail healing, to Michael's being here, to all sorts of other folks, resources coming in. That it's important to have someone of her training and caliber to be running kind of integrative quality control on all this stuff and help us understand how it all fits together. So I've said enough, don't you think, Elsie? Yeah. So, so without further ado, it is my great pleasure, great honor, great joy to introduce to you the Reverend Sally Howard and the most right Reverend Sacred Father, Michael Lapsley.
Wonderful. So it is really wonderful to be here with you today, Michael, and to have a chance to ask you at least some of the questions that I have wanted to learn and hear your perspective on. So I wanted to start by asking you if you could talk a little bit about how the Institute for Healing of Memories came about. Because just a preview of things to come, Michael is coming back again this spring to do a workshop for us at All Saints. So, yay, that's right. In fact, if I might brag, Michael has asked that All Saints and St. Jude's, a church where Wilma Jacobson is rector, to be a home base or centers on the West Coast for his healing ministry. So, all right. So, Michael, we'll turn to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's always for me a delight to be here at All Saints. You know, about 50% of what Ed said was true. And Where is he?
There he is.
Oh, okay.
There he is, yeah.
Without misinterpreting it, I sort of feel All Saints is a place where I have multiple concurrent partners. In other words, it's people that I really feel connected to. It's both it's a love affair with a community and with many people here over many, many years. So I feel very much at home. I don't feel like a visitor. I feel like I've come to report back to the community of faith. So great meeting old friends as well as new people. My brother is John. Is it John? John says to me just before, well, this must have been quite an experience, what happened to you. But, you know, John is not a journalist. If John had been a journalist, as has happened to me a number of times, people say to me, you were bombed. Did it affect you? I say, well, actually, yes. You know, anything which is life-threatening will be life-changing. And it will either cause us to grow or to diminish. Healing of memories really grew out of, if you like, two things. One was my reflection on what helped me to heal. Now, I received excellent medical treatment, first in Zimbabwe, where I was bombed, and then in Australia. But in a way, sort of Ed was sort of hinting, for many years before, I had been part of the liberation struggle, and a key part of my role in the liberation struggle was to seek to mobilize the community of faith across the world against apartheid, and to say across the world that apartheid was not simply a justice issue, was not simply a human rights issue, was not simply a political issue, but it was a faith issue, because it was a regime that claimed divine guidance for what it did. So in a way, the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ was at stake in South Africa, because either apartheid was true, that the most important thing about us is the color of our skin, or the gospel was true, that we're God's children, we're made in God's image and likeness. Now, and in a way, what I was saying across the world was, apartheid was an option for death carried out in the name of the gospel of life. And that was why it was an issue of faith to say no to it. And of course, in a way, the regime illustrated my point by then seeking to kill me. But when I was bombed, I received messages of prayer, love, and support from across the world. It's like everybody I'd ever met sent me a message. And I may have said this before here in this place, that I often say that, you know, when I die, I won't need a funeral, because people said all the nice things then. I don't know why they wait till we're dead before people start saying nice things about it. But my story was acknowledged, reverenced, recognized, and given a moral content. In other words, people said to me, what happened to me was wrong. So the prayer, the love, the support, the acknowledgement, the reverence, the recognizing, the giving of moral content was what enabled me to travel, as Ed said, a journey from being a victim to a survivor to a victor. You know, you know, often people say, and I guess, Sally, in your practice, there are people who say, I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor of abuse. I'm a survivor of trauma, of torture, of whatever. But I've always felt that somehow survivor is still very passive. You know, I was a victim and I've survived.
Yes.
And for me, the victor, that key step is about taking back agency, taking back the ability to shape and create the world. If you think of life being like a river, the river flows. Something happens in our life, whether we've been the victim, the perpetrator, a mixture of both, and our life becomes like a whirlpool. We live life in terms of this terrible incident. And often the key first step out of the whirlpool lies in the power of acknowledgement. When what has happened to me is fully acknowledged and people say, yes, it's true that it happened to you and that it was wrong. Yes. So this is what enabled me to take that extra step towards being a victor. So I reflected on what helped me heal. But when I went back to South Africa, I'd been away for 16 years. And what struck me was that we were a damaged nation. We were damaged in our humanity. We were damaged by what we'd done, by what had been done to us, and by what we failed to do. And we all carried stuff inside of us because of the nation's journey. You know, often we say a nation, say, okay, that's politics, sociology, economics. We think of the individual psychologically, sexually, emotionally, spiritually. But we don't often talk about how has the national journey affected me. How has what happened to my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, the wider family, how has that affected me? So this, if you like, this double reflection. The nation, myself, led with other colleagues for us to say, we need to create what we call safe and sacred spaces where people would be able to deal with what it is they have inside of them because of the journey they've traveled, to find the way in which people could begin to detoxify. Now, before you come to your next point, I wanted to introduce to you my colleague, Thandika Hosani, who's one of the facilitators of Healing of Memories, and he's part of our Restoring Humanity. You'll see when he stands up that we are about the same age.
Wonderful. Thank you. Michael, can you talk about some of the ways or some of the places that you've done Healing of Memory workshops here in the United States?
Yeah, no, thank you. You know, the institutes, we started our work around 93, 94, or should I say, we started doing these Healing of Memories workshops. And it was like we conceived of it as a parallel process to South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, recognizing that the Commission would give a platform for the few, but everybody had been affected. Everybody had this story to tell. Now, the Institute was started in 1998, and the first place we were invited to come to outside South Africa, it was not the United States, it was New York City. And we came to a church that many of you, perhaps most of you have heard of, Riverside Church. And that was where the very first workshop took place in the United States. And interestingly, the same year we went to Rwanda, 4 years after the genocide. But one of the things that was striking about that particular workshop was that there were quite a number of people who had been part, particularly African Americans, but also some white people who had been part of the civil rights movement. But they said to us, this was the first time they'd had an opportunity to deal with their pain. And the struggle they had learned to analyze politically, they'd learned how to struggle and to fight for basic rights, but they never dealt with what they were carrying inside them. And so since then we've come back here many, many times. You know, All Saints we came for many years, but All Saints, you know, people here are a bit slow in learning. So I had to come back about 10 times before they said, we're going to do a Healing of Memories workshop at All Saints. I thought, oh, at last. And of course now we have several. And where's Karen? Karen has been one of the movers and shakers as well of helping the workshops, and now in fact is working part-time for the Institute for Healing of Memories, North America. So we've done a place like All Saints, and it's the community of faith and extender who come, and they come to a Healing of Memories for all kinds of reasons, but basically to deal with their stuff. And we say to people, come to our workshop, and we promise you one step on the road to healing. Not magic, not quick fix, but if people are telling a story about what happened to them 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago for the first time, it may be life-changing. It may be the point where the whirlpool stops and continues. But in New York City, we work with a group, an organization called Barrier-Free Living that works with women who have been abused or also disabled. In Arizona and also in Minnesota, we've worked particularly with homeless war veterans. And of course, shamefully, a disproportionate number of homeless people in the United States are in fact, war veterans. But what is striking, even in the work with war veterans, is that sometimes the greatest trauma, sometimes it was war, sometimes it wasn't war. It was stuff that from childhood, and they came to the military already damaged and messed up. And sometimes the military actually provided a kind of holding operation or a structure. And when they got out of the military, you were back with the stuff that you never had an opportunity to deal with. So while some of our workshops, and interestingly, Tantakara and I have been the last 2 days at St. Paul's Community Baptist Church in East New York. And every year they have an enactment of what they call the Ma'afa Healing Journey. And it's the story of the Middle Passage. And they do this drama. At some points, they have 80 to 100 people on stage as they enact it. And yesterday morning at 5 in the morning, we were on the beach in the final part of the ceremony and remembering the ancestors. And one of the things they kept talking about was the millions and millions of people. I mean, how many people died on the Middle Passage? And I've often felt that white America has no comprehension of the pain which is black America. But the exciting thing is we're going to go back to New York and we're going to do Healing of Memories workshops with that community. Because what they said to us was, they do this enactment and all this stuff comes up, all the emotions, but then what do they do with what it is they're feeling? And we had this wonderful meeting with the minister of the church a few days ago, and he said, oh, are you working with other African-American congregations? And so I looked at him, and the Holy Spirit then spoke to me and said, no, we think this will be a trailblazer. He said, yes, you've just given the right word. We want to be trailblazers. So for us, that has been something we've desired to do, is to have the opportunity of partnering with primarily African-American communities. But also when we're in Arizona, we'll be meeting with a Native American leader, because in many parts of the world, we've also worked with indigenous communities. And next year, we're going to have a conference of bringing indigenous people from different parts of the world, looking at what are the obstacles that indigenous people experience as obstacles to their healing, but also what are the resources, the spiritual resources they have to give one another in terms of their own healing journey. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you.
Sorry,
Yes,
under
yes.
PS, I've often felt that deep and true healing will not come to the United States until there's a full acknowledgement of both what happened to indigenous people and to slavery. And it will haunt this country until there is indeed a full acknowledgement. And of course, healing will not come until the United States gets over its pathological addiction to war.
Amen. Well, that's music to our souls here, Michael. And, you know, I wondered if you could talk more about sacred and safe space and how to create that, and how do we take this healing of the personal into the political? Because we believe, too, that they are interconnected. We're all interconnected. And there isn't, finally, full personal healing without corporate healing.
You know, thank you. Thank you. People have said to us at various places, they said, you know, in our church we have, not necessarily called healing of memories, but we have something like healing of memories. We have programs or workshops or seminars, and they say, and they've been good, and they've helped me talk about me and the family, me and Jesus, and they've been very good. But some of my deepest pain, some people have said to us, is about racism. But that's called politics, so you don't deal with that. So I think this has been part of the gift we've brought, is to bring that intersection together. So not to have workshops where you have political discussions, but rather where you can talk about the totality of your pain, but also your pain of being part of a community and part of a nation. And begin to, and some people, you know, when we first started doing workshops in Berkeley at a graduate school, we have a question we ask people at one part of the workshop where we say, how has the nation's journey affected you? And the person organizing the workshop said, oh, that would not be appropriate to ask in the United States. I have to say, we insisted it went in, and he repented. You know, especially, and someone corrected me quite rightly about this about a year ago, and I said, apart from indigenous people, this is a nation of immigrants, of people who chose to come from other places. And people quite rightly corrected me and said, no, African Americans didn't choose to come to the United States. They came with violence. They were forced to, you know, to come here. And for me, that was a very important correction. So the issue in the United States of the nation and the individual is incredibly important, but also it's important because of Western individualism. You know, the Western philosophical tradition is it Descartes, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, where the African philosophical tradition says I am because you are. A person is a person through other people.
Yes.
And again, we have to recover that. We have to recover that communal identity that I can only be myself in relationship, you know, to others. But safe and sacred spaces is also, I don't know if there's a book I read many years ago called, by a guy called John Powell, who's a Jesuit, called Why I'm Afraid to Tell You Who I Am. And the book says that so often as people, we're afraid to tell each other who we are because we're not sure what the response will be. We're not sure if we'll be accepted. And because of the psychological games, and you can perhaps tell us more about this, Sally, that people play with themselves, where the victim blames themselves to be the victim. So the person who's been raped or sexually violated often has a sense of shame. And so if I tell you who I am, how will you respond? And sometimes people have put their toe in the water and said, you know, when I was, you know, 15, I thought of committing suicide. And then the response is, but you know that's a sin. And then you keep quiet for another 20, 30, you know, 40 years.
Absolutely.
So the issue of safe space, and part of that for us is that we have one of our ground rules is confidentiality. So people come to a workshop, and when they leave the workshop, they're free to tell anybody what they said at the workshop, but they're not free to tell what other people said, only if they were given permission. So that's a safe space. Sacred spaces, it's about, many people have said to us over the years, in the workshop, people feel that this is holy ground, because we're dealing with, our workshop, and many of you have been to it or know this, is deceptively simple. But you're dealing with us as human beings at our most profound level, but also with our nakedness as well, with our beauty, our ambiguity, but also our brokenness and our messed upness.
Yes. Good, good. I have another question, but we only have about 15 minutes left. So should we open it up to other people? All right. Thank you, Mike.
And we said that we're happy people not to make another speech, but to make you can make a short comment, say something.
Right.
It can be a question, but thank you.
Got it. All right.
Just while people have questions, I wanted to acknowledge the presence here of a great South African who's come here to retire, Anne Hope. Do you want to identify yourself, Anne? Are you still here?
All right. Great.
And Anne and her partner are really legendary figures of people who've worked for community development and participation and people developing their full potentials. She's wrote, her and Sally Timmel wrote, is Sally here as well?
No, she's not today.
Legendary books about, workbooks about training to transformation that are used in many parts of the world. So thank you, Sally, for, thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Michael. I was absolutely delighted to hear that you were going to be here today and that I would have a chance to see you again. Michael is a legend in South Africa, as of course you all know. I mean, he has really transformed the whole situation of people recognizing that it is possible for us to grow past the damages of apartheid and to move into a new phase of freedom as children of God. So I'm very honored to be greeted by him today.
Right.
I have a question. There's somebody else. Okay. Is healing of the memories the same as forgiving? I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
No. Next question. No, thank you, my sister, for the question. They aren't the same, but it's interesting, in our workshops of healing of memories in South Africa, the issue that people put on the table more than any other single issue is forgiveness. And part of it, and we could have spent this whole time together reflecting on forgiveness. And part of the difficulty is that because it's so central, particularly to Christian faith, we often speak of it as if it's something glib and cheap and easy. But most human beings experience it as costly, as painful, as difficult. And indeed, for many people, forgiveness may be the key to healing of memories. But often, before people can even begin to want to forgive, often when people are hurting, what they're asking for is a hug, not a sermon. And when they're told, and you should forgive, their burdens get even greater. Where if they get the hug and they're accompanied on their journey, then perhaps they will choose to travel a journey of forgiveness. And it may be their fundamental liberation. I mean, I think forgiveness is a kind of healthy selfishness. And I've met many people who've said to me, I have chosen to forgive for the sake of my own freedom, because I cannot carry unforgiveness any longer. But you know, in my case, I don't know who sent me the letter bomb. I don't know who made it. I don't know who gave the orders. So I haven't forgiven anybody, because I don't know what it means to forgive an abstraction. I've said I'm not full of hatred, I'm not bitter, I don't want revenge, but forgiveness is not yet on the table. But if I was to say, I cannot heal until I meet these personal persons, then I would have been a prisoner now for 20 years, 24 years. So I've traveled my journey of healing of memories, dealing with my stuff. So what I'm saying is, healing of memories is always on the table. Always is a question of me dealing with what I have in me. Sometimes forgiveness will be possible. It's very interesting. I spent some time studying the Greek of the New Testament, and I confess I've forgotten 99.9% of what I learned. But in the part that I remember, the word for forgiveness in the New Testament, aphiemi, is the same word as untying a knot. So indeed, forgiveness may be indeed liberating. But also reality is much more messy, ambiguous, and ambivalent than sometimes the books people write about it. I forgive you today, sir. I'm not sure about tomorrow. No? Okay. But thank you. But next time we'll have the whole seminar on forgiveness. Yes.
Yes. As a psychotherapist, I struggle with our model. I struggle with, there are so many people that need therapy that can't afford the kind of model that we have. You know, one-on-one, charging $100 an hour or things like that. And
so why don't you offer your services free? What's your problem?
Well, I sometimes do. But, you know, it also, so much of it is secular, you know, and not in a faith community. And I just wonder about a different model that would be more of a group, more of a community, and more of the Holy Spirit being in it, that this might be a way, because you know, what also bothers me is the people that need it the most usually have the least money to be able to pay for it.
Yes.
So to me, I feel really a struggle with it.
You know, thank you for that. I remember once I was in a workshop in the Northern Cape in South Africa, and there were at least 11 people in that workshop who needed expert clinical intervention, and the nearest possibility was 1,000 kilometers away. You know? So it wasn't going to happen. You know? I spent 5 years as chaplain to Trauma Center for Victims of Violence and Torture. And my colleagues were psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and I was the priest. Fortunately, no one had any idea what the priest was supposed to do, which was really great, because I did my thing, and I said, this is what priests do. But in that 5 years, I learned a couple of things. One was that, yes, we were all damaged by apartheid. Yes, we all had a story to tell. Yes, we were all carrying stuff in us. But we were not all in need of clinical intervention. We were not all pathological. A small proportion were who needed expert intervention. But for the many, they were leading functioning lives, but they still had unfinished business. They still needed the safe and sacred space. The other thing I learned was that it seemed to me that we had if there's such a term, over-expertized the response to human pain. And my point is not to devalue the role of the expert, but to say we've undervalued the wisdom of the ages, the wisdom of our cultures and our faith tradition. Now, in our workshop, we are not psychiatrists, we're not psychologists, we're not psychotherapists, we're facilitators. Now, we're not pretending to be something we're not. And so where people say, this happened to me 20 years ago, and every night I've woken up screaming, they need clinical intervention. And so our job is to refer, but also even people who are in psychotherapy, sometimes the therapist will send them to us, because generally, when I go to my therapist, when I finish telling my story, in most cases, the therapist does not say, you think you're messed up, wait till you hear my story. So it's a bit of a one-way street. So and again, I'm not undervaluing the one-on-one. The one-on-one can be of profound value. But there is a kind of healing that can only come in collective settings. It's what a colleague of mine talks about, the power of multiple witnesses. Because when I'm in a collective space, I tell my story. I listen to myself telling my story, but then I hear your story, and your story, and your story, and your story. And what I discover is that we're one human family. I discover that what unites us is pain, and that pain is transcendent. Pain can be what enables us to connect to one another. And then I feel less alone, because often, even if there has been war or massive oppression, people often feel very lonely because they know others have suffered. What they don't know is that others are carrying some of the same stuff, that others have got some of the same feelings. And the fact that they have those feelings is not a sign of their craziness, it's a sign of their humanness. So, I mean, I think it's wonderful that you know, you have a Sally Howard, who's a psychoanalyst and a priest, who can continue to do her clinical work, but also that this can be complementary. And I think it's wonderful that, you know, All Saints has put her with responsibilities for the healing ministry, because you see, God is not limited in the way God heals human beings. And there are some people that I want to say, Sally, can you see this person? Maybe even for quite a long time. And there'll be people that Sally meets who'll say, I think it'd be wonderful if they were to participate in healing of memories. And of course, many other, you know, modalities as well that can help different people at different times. But let me say my last, in a slightly different point. I am, and this is true particularly in terms of war, I am delighted that people get PTSD. I think it's great. Wouldn't it be terrible if human beings could kill each other and they were unaffected? Those are the ones you should worry about. But the fact people get sick when they kill each other is a sign of the fullness of our humanity. Thank you very much.
Father Michael, I wanted to ask you about the process of writing your recent memoir. In the process of looking at your whole journey, was there something that you surprised yourself or that you learned by looking at that?
Well, you know, I had this book that was written about me about 16 years ago, a biography by Michael Worsnop called Priest and Partisan. And many of the reviewers, even at that time, said, one day we want to hear from him in his voice. What's his version of history? Of his history. And through the years, many people said to me, you must write, you must write, you must write. And I would say, yes, 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 but I was always on the way to the airport at the time. And then this man came along called Stephen Karakassian, who was an Armenian-American born in Jerusalem, who's also, like many people today, has had many lives, and one of his lives is as a psychotherapist. And he said, you must write, I'll do the writing. And that was the beginning of the project. And he did nothing else for 2 years but work on this. He had access to everything that I had was published, but also we had 2 months with the Merino Fathers and Brothers in New York, where we recorded interviews every day, and he transcribed them, and then we were very fortunate. We won a fellowship at the end to Bellagio in Italy, where for a month we went through the book chapter by chapter, page by page, line by line, word by word. And interestingly, there was a reviewer in South Africa on this national book program, and she's very interesting thinking about this book. It's a book in the spoken voice. It's not in the written voice, it's in the spoken voice. And those who know me too well recognize my voice there. But also, the other thing was the book tells my story, but also tells the story of what the peoples of the world have taught me. Traveling the world. The book has much wisdom. It's not my wisdom, it's wisdom that I have received from people in many countries, which is, and also I realized when I wrote the book that there had to be a degree of self-disclosure. So there were things that I said in the book that I had never told another human being, before. But also, I realized that if I was to project myself as a plastic figure, people might say, "Oh, we admire him," but it doesn't help us in our lives. So it was important that I also self-disclose my messed upness, my ambiguities, my ambivalence, my contradictions, because I think as people read it, they can recognize themselves and say, yes. And what's been fascinating about many of the reviews of the book, people don't talk about me or the book, they talk about themselves. And that's wonderful, because it means the book has been a mirror to people of their own journey. And my niece read it, and she said, there's a lot of painful things in this book, but at the end of it, I had a deep sense of hope. And I think that's wonderful. So.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, Michael and Sally. Michael will be back in the springtime, and he's going to celebrate at the Mass of the Eucharist at 11:15. Thanks again.